You know, this could be a category of deer hunting tips, but really these are kind of random because they're all over the place. Dylan and I just thought of some things that are somewhat common or somewhat commonly practiced, but not everyone knows. And especially, I get so many comments on my YouTube channel. I've only been hunting 2 years. I just shot my first buck. I'm looking to shoot my first deer. I just shot my first deer. It was a doe last night. Thanks for the tips. It's crazy. I get so many comments from people that have been, someone this morning, they've been hunting 46 years. 35 years, 30 years. So they're all across the board. And really that's the goal of the channel, is to not only offer solid deer hunting advice that people can use, but to help retain hunters and recruit new hunters, keep people in the hunting fold, and make sure that we're adding hunters every year instead of subtracting. And if we can do that, then we're accomplishing something. And these are common tips that I think we take for granted sometimes. And we're gonna go through these real quick. The first one, though, is maybe not so uncommon. I have to give credit where credit is due. I try to do that, and Dylan suggested this the other day, and I just kind of ran with it, but we were talking about fawns, Dylan, I think, and you talked about, that fawns need 2 senses, 3 senses.
To pick you out, yep.
To pick you out. Well, and what Dylan was saying, we were talking about is, deer have 3 senses, sight, sound, and smell. And a fawn, because they're so inexperienced, you can throw button bucks in that as being very inexperienced because they get kicked out of the herd a lot of times, even when they're fawn, and they just have to find their own way. They're those little deer wandering aimlessly. Almost all the time it's a button buck. But fawn does, even 1.5-year-old bucks, yearlings sometimes. And we'll talk about this real quick. A yearling is a 1.5-year-old deer. A fawn is a few months old. There's a big difference. They're not two in the same. A lot of people say, oh, it's a yearling, referring to fawns, when a yearling is not a fawn is not a yearling. But that being said, a yearling buck, here's a pile of them right here. These are sheds from yearling bucks around here. These are yearling bucks, all same diameter, different bucks. That's what a yearling buck is. There's not much to them. First set of antlers, and they're just not that wise. Those kind of bucks need 3 senses. They want to see you, hear you, and smell you before they run away. They're very curious. Sometimes they'll walk right up to you. They'll let you get close. And that's what Dylan was pointing out about fawns, that they need these 3 senses. And I started thinking that, what's interesting with that is mature does need 2. How many times have you seen a doe looking right at you, just stomping, and then she'll walk around, get downwind of you, and bolt? She needed 2 senses. Doesn't matter if she sees you, hears you, or smells you. She's stomping like that. You can rest assured if you made a little noise, she's gone. She needs 2 senses. Mature buck needs 1. And that's the difference between these deer. A mature buck sees you, hears you, or smells you. He's gone. Mature doe, most of the time, that's why they stomp, that's why they stare, they move around, they go downwind of you too. They already know something's there. That's why they're trying to pick all this up and process it, and then they take off. Those fawns, yearling bucks, even some young does, sometimes they need 3 senses. So think about that. And that's why it's so different. We talk about generally hunting 1 sense deer, mature bucks, which takes a lot more strategy and planning than it does even doe hunting. The sign of a great deer parcel is that does are easy to kill. Does should not be hard to kill, public land or private land, because they do the same thing every day. They have a very small, just a fraction of the home range of mature bucks. They have small home ranges, they do the same thing every day, and they really relate to that afternoon food source. If you kick them out of this bedding area, they just go across the field and bed over there, but they still hit the food source every single night, if that's that main food source that they want to hit every day. So does are a lot different. The mature bucks are surely different than the fawns, yearling bucks, and those young deer too. So think about that. What deer are you trying to hunt, and how careful are you? Because how careful you are in covering up all 3 senses will make sure that you're on those mature bucks consistently every year. We'll talk about that at the end, how you can really make sure. Number 2, this is random, of course. I've been pulling my bow up into stands since the time where I put my arm up through between the string and the riser and the limb and just climb up the tree. Very dangerous. And so I quickly learned that dropping a rope down and pulling it up was really the best thing. Didn't always pay attention to if the arrows were up or down. That may seem obvious to you, but to some it's not. It's all something, a learning process. My brother and I grew up in a non-hunting family, so we had to figure these things out on our own. My brother stopped hunting in the 90s, but I continued on hunting. I love it. And I had to learn on my own. No one was teaching me. You try to read magazines, things like that, but you don't really learn until you're actually out in the woods. You can't learn this stuff in a book. And one of those things involves pulling your bow up or down. If you have your quiver on your bow, you pull it with the quiver hood facing up when you're pulling it up, and you pull it with the quiver hood facing down, the nock's pointing up when you're letting it down. We all learn that the hard way. I was telling Dylan I learned it by dropping my bow down, arrows first, arrows catching on the brush, bow getting hung up, then it can't slide through the brush, not to mention arrows coming out of the quiver, just a horrible noisy mess. And Dylan talked about dropping your bow down and your nocks getting dirt in them because you're dropping the bow down, the nocks in your quiver end up the bow. Even if the arrows are sitting off the bottom of the cam, they're tipping over, digging into the dirt, and it's just cover up going up, cover down going down. So I hope that makes sense, but it's something we've all learned, and if you're a new hunter, you'll appreciate that. Now, this is debatable, a knife. I don't bring a knife in the woods. Part of it's superstitious, but I'm not a whittler, so I don't need it in my stand. I don't need my knife with me. I'm usually a half hour from the car at worst, and I get help to get a deer out, especially in my older age. I'm usually going after dark. I'm going with some friends. We're having a good time getting that deer out. If it's cool enough, I'm definitely going after dark. So I'm getting my knife then, I'm getting gear, gunning gloves, whatever I might need to get that deer out, drag rope. I'm getting it at that time. I don't want to carry that stuff with me. I don't need to. Now, a lot of people say, well, I won't go in the woods without a knife, and I can appreciate that, but it's debatable whether you need it or not. And the whole idea is snacks, whatever it might be, games, board game, whatever it might be you want in your stand, do you really need it? I'm out there to hunt. If I want any entertainment, I have my phone right there. I can look at the news. That actually keeps me down, not moving. And the other day we were hunting, Dylan and I, he couldn't see the water hole because he's filming and the camera's looking at, and so he couldn't see it. I'm on here writing something probably for a YouTube video description or something. I look up and there's a doe right there at the water hole already. She just came right in. But normally when your head's down, you're not moving, nothing knows you're there. You hear things coming in. You're focusing on something like this. The more stuff you bring in the stand, the more you have to potentially take your focus away from actually hunting. And you could say the cell phone does that sometimes, but you're not getting things out of your pack, snacks, food. How many mature bucks have been lost because someone was getting a snack out of their backpack or some water they couldn't either grab? And we've all seen the funny pictures where the guy's, using the restroom over against a tree over there, and he gets literally caught with his pants down, and there's a giant buck there and he can't reach for his gun. It's the same thing. You're reaching for water, snacks. I assume that you're not crocheting in the stand, but whatever it is, think about more of a minimalist approach, because every one of those items has the ability to take your focus away from deer hunting and detract from you filling your tag. So think about everything. Not to mention, the bigger the pack you have, the more it looks like another person sitting in the stand. Dylan and I have to be very careful. We're very experienced in not spooking deer. I can honestly say I don't believe that Dylan, in all the years we've hunted a couple times in a tree together, I don't think he spooked a deer. I don't remember him ever spooking a deer. And I don't say that lightly, because that's a hard thing to do. It takes experience to know when to move, know when to move the camera, turn it on. So you have to be very wary and experienced. But everything you have in that pack, size of the pack, can detract from you filling your tag. Number 4, trail cams. Again, this is all over the place and random. When you're setting your trail camera, face them north. The heat from the sun and the light, and a lot of times we'll have a camera facing into the north, but the sunlight's coming through a hole in the trees, it hits in front of the camera. This happens with water a lot. If you have a puddle in front of you, the light's hitting off that water, heat comes up, camera will take a picture. So I've had that even on a north-facing camera. I can think of a couple in particular, especially one in the UP of Michigan on the other side of Camp Bar Creek where I used to hunt on our own property. It was on a north-facing camera setup, but it was water, it was flooded, and it just kept, that was probably in the days of 36 exposure, so it burned all my cameras, my pictures in the late 90s, early 2000s. But be very careful on making sure the majority of the time your cameras are facing north. The one exception is sometimes if you're downhill, if you're pointed at an extreme angle, up high looking down, you can get away with that. But again, if the sun's shining right where you're facing that camera, you're gonna get some false triggers. So facing that camera north, making sure it's not facing towards the sun, because the sun's always in the southern hemisphere. That's where it makes its arc, lower arc as it gets later into the year, and that'll shine right into the camera. So face it in that north-northwest, north-northeast, northwest-northeast, north, and you're gonna be all set, and you're gonna avoid a lot of false triggers. Number 5, patience tracking deer. This is a pet peeve of mine. I create a video about this every year. But more deer are lost because people push it. I had a friend this morning, Joe, who shot a really great buck, and we were debating with the hit what happened, and he gave it 4.5 hours. And bottom line is, with a little bit more story involved that I won't share here, he got the deer. He gave it the appropriate amount of time to die, and that's so critical for the type of hit. And a lot of times, you don't know the exact hit. Joe's probably shot 50, 70, 80 deer. I don't know if he maybe shot 100 deer. The bottom line is he shot a lot of deer, and he was pretty close on where he thought he hit the deer with the arrow, which is saying a lot because it's really hard. So many people, it seems like every hit out there of a lost deer was a double lung. Think about it. I know it was a double lung. Well, then if it was double lung, you would have found it in 200 yards. The thing can't breathe. Pretty easy to find that deer. Same with a heart shot. Pretty undeniable what those are when you shoot them. Be very patient. I've had deer that I just knew was a mature buck. I walk up to it, and it was my target buck. I didn't know it was that buck. I just thought it was a mature buck. So I get mixed up on what buck it is. I made a few mistakes before, just where I thought it was a lot bigger one, it ended up being a smaller one. Ground shrinkage, they call it when you go up there. So when you're hunting and right now, if I see a mature buck right now, my heart rate's gonna just blow through my chest. I'm gonna be shaking. I'm gonna be shaking when I grab that bow. Hopefully I'll be steady when I make the shot, but I get excited. When you're excited in your emotions, I have a friend that likes to say, when you make decisions based on emotion, you usually make bad decisions. Something bad happens. You're excited, you wanna go get that deer. The last thing you need to do is run right out there, exercise patience. Know that generally, gut shot deer, when you have food on your arrow, it's gonna take around 5 hours to die. Liver shot, an hour. Lower liver, right behind the heart, could take a day or more. Intestines, where you have clear, watery blood on the arrow, could take 24 hours to 36 hours, even more. Heart shot, lung shot, dead in a few seconds. That's what we all want. And that's the ethical way. But know your shot. Know how long it takes to die. Because the bottom line is, when you make that shot, a lot of times we don't know exactly. Sometimes we can look back on a camera, but a lot of us aren't hunting with cameras. We don't have that luxury. We don't want to. We don't want to carry it out with us, and I don't blame you. But bottom line, if you're patient, you're going to find a lot more deer, because a mortally wounded deer will lay up with halfway decent cover within 200 to 300 yards. I know Joe's this morning, they gave him time to die. He only went 120 yards before it bedded down. And he thinks he might have kicked it when he went out of the stand. It was staying at like 80 yards and bound over a hill. 45 minutes later, after he got out, he didn't even go over there. He walked away the opposite direction. And he thought he might have spooked it. And sure enough, it went over the ridge. It was 120 yards instead of 80 yards. So mortally wounded deer will not go very far unless you push it. And that's the big problem. If you push it, deer don't run 200 yards and look back. They run a half mile or more. If it's open fields, they run 3/4 mile to a mile. They're gone. And no blood, especially with a poor hit. So be very careful, exercise a lot of patience when you shoot a deer, and you're gonna find you recover your deer the vast majority of the time. In fact, I would argue if you're patient with deer and you're giving it the appropriate amount of time to die, you're gonna find those deer 95, 98% of the time. So think about that. You shoot 100 deer. Unfortunately, it's bow hunting, it's not perfect, but at the same time, you can be near perfection if you make smart decisions after the shot. And finally, if you hunt based on weather days, quality weather days, getting on the stand. That's why I developed HuntCast for HuntWise. That's why I talk about rutcast, knowing when to hunt, where to hunt based on the phases of the rut, and then applying those weather techniques. But if you hunt by the weather, you're going, or just slant your days towards the good weather. And we all can't hunt the perfect days, but make sure you're slanting your vacation one way or another based on the weather. 3-day weekends, maybe a Friday is better weather day than Monday, so do that. See if you can have that flexibility in your career. But bottom line is, if you're hunting by the weather, and then SSS, sight, sound, and scent. If you control your sight, sound, and scent in the woods, meaning that controls your access, how noisy your stands are, your approach, you're always blowing your scent towards a non-deer area, open woods, lake, river, open pasture, neighborhood, house, open woodlot where there's no deer. Bottom line is, if you're always controlling your stand location, that's the best form of scent control. If you have quiet approach, quiet stands, quiet gear, if you don't let the deer see you because you're avoiding bedding areas when you go in the afternoon, you're avoiding food sources when you go in the morning, then you control those factors, hunt by the weather, you're gonna have success. You can basically throw everything away in this channel and just do those things, master them. You're gonna be a great hunter for the rest of your life. I hope you enjoy the rest of the tips and these random tips. I thought it was pretty interesting when Dylan talked about that the other day. I thought, how can we incorporate that into a video? Because 3 senses for fawns, 2 senses for does, And a mature buck only needs 1 sense tripped off and he's gone. If you hunt like that and you use these, number 6, the weather, cover your sight, sound, scent, you're gonna have good hunting success for the rest of your life, and that's what this channel is all about. Just wanna help you guys find success, not only this fall, but beyond. Folks, I wanna make sure you check out my web class video series, whether it's how to design your food plot program or how to design your property in general. And we have a new one coming out that'll be how to hunt the rut. But these bucks back here are a testament. Some of these bucks go back to 93. They're even in different states. I urge you to check out those web classes so that you can help yourself, help your land, help your hunt. The link is in the description. And also for those that have tried them out, I encourage you to offer some feedback in the comments below. Thank you.